Hi, my name is Jennifer Hawkins, and I'm an ag agent with the Cooperative Extension Service for the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, and I'm located on the island of Molokai. Today I'm going to talk just a little bit about fencing your garden. So we've got some instructional video that we'll share with you, and I hope that this will be helpful for you, and it will also be enjoyable, and that you'll be able to protect your garden from the deer. So as we begin to start thinking about our fencing, we need to start getting some supplies together. So some of the supplies you're going to need would be, of course, the fencing. You're going to need some zip ties. You're going to need your fence post. You're going to need some cutters to be able to cut any of the zip ties that you may mess up. You're also going to need some stakes, some garden stakes, and a hammer of some sort. As we begin, we're taking into account the fact that you've probably already just set out your garden. You already staked out your garden and squared it off. So we're going to start with the next step of already having your garden spots set and squared up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our measuring tape. So for us, we had a 300-foot tape with us today. 100-foot would work if you've got a 25 by 25 or smaller. So we're going to start at one corner. We're actually going to peg down our measuring tape, and then we're going to wrap it around the stakes that we have driven in the ground at each of our corners. Those stakes represent where our corner posts will be for our garden fence. So our garden plot is 25 by 25, so we wrap the measuring tape around so that we know each corner, right, is at 25, at 50, and then at 75, and when we get back to the first corner, we better be at 100 to make sure that we have everything square, because we only have a 100-foot roll of the deer fencing to work with, so we've got to make sure that everything is set perfect. The next thing that you need to do is make sure that all the weeds and the grass are cleared out from this area before you start your fencing. So now that we've got everything measured off, we also need to decide where our center posts on each side are going to go. So we're only going to have our 4 corner posts, and then we'll have 1 center post on each side. And then on the side that we're going to have a gate, we'll actually have 1 additional post. So what you'll see us do is start with our post and our post driver. I did forget the post driver in our supply list. So you will need a post driver. It's really important when you're driving posts that you actually hold the pounder correctly. You utilize the up and down momentum that's created with the post driver, and not just rely upon the energy that you're creating. The other thing that you really need to be concerned about or watch is the safety of your back, always in gardening, but your back when you're driving these fence posts, and also your legs. So you've got to remember this pound is coming down with pretty good force, and so you don't want your arms and then your back to take all the pressure. So you need to stand with your back straight and your knees bent, so that every time the pound comes and the pressure comes, you're giving an escape for that pressure. So you're bending your knees so it's not just pounding on your spine. I always stand with my feet side to side, so about a foot and a half apart. I know Ipo, who is the assistant that you see here in some of the video, Ipo actually stands with 1 leg forward and 1 just a few inches back, so that she has more upward movement and ease of movement, but she also keeps her legs bent when she does it. You gotta at least drive the post to where the angle at the bottom, the top of the spike part, is under the soil. And you also, by standing up straight, you're also driving the post straighter. So those are very important keys that we have to be concerned about here. So you're going to drive all of your posts. When you're driving your end post, you really need to be looking from the end and looking down the side to make sure that all of your posts are lining up. So if your posts don't line up, you're either going to have to pull them back up, or you're going to have to have a fence line that's just not straight. The problem with this particular plot, if we don't have a fence line that's straight, is that we don't have the wiggle room with the length of the fencing that we have to have any extra play in the sides. And so because we've got 100 linear foot and we've got 100 linear foot of fence, everything is really tight, so we've got to make sure those posts are in line. The next thing that you need to do is get your fencing and your zip ties ready. And so we use zip ties. Usually we use the 6 to 8 inch zip ties. For some things we do go ahead and use some 4-inch zip ties, but you always want to make sure that you get the zip ties that are rated for the sun, so they don't break down so easy, and that are also indoor outdoor, and it helps to be heavy duty. So what I like about the 8-inch cables is that they're thicker and they're sturdier, but you definitely have to clip the ends when you get finished. So most of the time we end up going with the 6-inch. So once you get your fencing started and you've got your first zip tie connected, you always want to make sure that with the zip ties you are zipping under one of the knobs or the projections that is on the fence post, and you want to make sure that you go catty corner through a connection, like a centerpiece, where all the wires are coming together when you zip tie, because that's going to be a sturdier stay, so it's not going to wiggle up and down, and it's not going to wiggle from side to side. That we have learned the hard way, so I want to go ahead and give you that tip. The next thing that we did is we put one right under the first knot, and then we counted down 7, and we put the next zip tie right under the 7th knot, and then we counted down, so every 7, and then we put one at the very bottom where the fence actually connected to the ground. So you're going to do that all the way around, and then you're going to come back, and at your corner post you may have a little excess, so your fencing may be 7 foot. So for us, we were able to get 6-foot posts, but our fencing is 7 foot. So once we drove the 6-foot post on the ground, it only left us 5.5 foot above ground. So we lined our fencing up with the top of our post, and then we staked it at the ground. Once we got it straight, we staked it at the ground, right at the bottom of that straight section, creating a wall about 1 foot, and on that foot we staked it right at the bottom of our fencing, and then we went out about to the next to the last wire where it's laid back on the ground. So you can see that in this particular section where the weed mat is, where the fencing is actually pulled tight on the ground, about a foot barrier around the outside of the fence. And with that, make sure that you double stake it. So you're going to stake it at the fence line, and you're going to stake it that foot out. At the corners, you may need to go ahead and cut a slit so that everything lays flat for you, but only cut up to the fence post. Don't cut any higher, because you don't want to give any openings for the fence. Make sure that you stake those corners that you've just cut, because eventually, if you don't need this, then you could cut the zip ties and roll it back up and use it again. So we cut our top 5 foot and our bottom 5 foot, and our sides are 5.5 foot. The reason for that is because the posts that we have are 6-foot posts, and so when we drove them in the ground, basically we have 5.5 foot that is exposed surface for us to connect to. We're actually just gonna wrap this with some of the deer fencing, just to have an easier gate to open and close versus just a gap. It'll be something more solid that the deer really hopefully won't be able to get through, versus trying to wiggle in with a gap. The other thing that you didn't see me do, because this is just a demonstration and we may take this apart and add pieces in, is that you would need to primer and glue your pipes and your fittings, unless this is something that's just temporary for you. If you make sure you have the right fittings and you're using this just as a temporary gate, then that may be something that you don't want to glue simply because you're going to want to take it apart and use it for something else in the future. Anyway, just wanted to show you what we had going and hope everything goes well with you guys.